Hello, welcome to another science and technology video with Miss Hinkson. So today we're just going to do a reading together. I've asked you guys to read pages 430 to 432. We are studying the scientific method and basically how do we go about studying science and experiments and all that stuff. So I've asked you to read a couple of pages. But I thought that maybe it might be beneficial if we read them together. So whether you're at home or in class, we could read these pages together. So we're reading How to Apply the Experimental Method, pages 430 to 432. There's a lot of information there, and we're going to read through it together. So page 30, How to Apply the Experimental Method. Okay, so I'm on this page here. The scientific method and problem solving. The objective of science is to describe, explain, and predict phenomena. To solve a problem, scientists use a method that guides their thought processes and experiments. It is called the scientific method. Scientists' primary concern is to establish relationships between the problem that they need to solve and existing phenomena. In other words, they must determine whether a theory that is already accepted by the scientific community can explain the problem that they are studying. If not, they must suggest changes to existing theories or develop new ones. So we're moving on to another paragraph. When scientists develop a new theory, they often need to deduce connections between the problem that they need to solve and other phenomena in order to arrive at a temporary explanation. This is called hypothetical deduction. Sometimes they need to predict what is going to happen. This is called hypothetical prediction. In each case, scientists must verify their explanations and predictions using experiments. This is called the experimental method, which is a part of the scientific method. In class, you will apply accepted theories to problems that you need to solve. You too will learn how to use the scientific method to guide your thought processes and experiments. So just let's take a pause from the reading right now. We've basically been introduced to the scientific method, and we have become aware that the scientific method is like problem solving. Okay, so far we've seen that you see that there's a problem or you observe something, and you can look and see if there are any theories that have been put forth to explain what you're seeing. So any theories that the scientific community has accepted already. And if there are no theories, then you have to develop your own. So you have to develop your own predictions as to why things are happening. Okay, and then what follows from this is your observation and your prediction is that you're going to do an experiment to basically check and see if your theory is correct, right? So that is the first part of the reading. Now we are going on to the part that says the experimental method. So we're reading again. The experimental method consists of 5 steps. However, you might want to change the order provided here. Also, you might not need to do each step every time you want to solve a problem. You can always backtrack and make changes as you go along. So here's step number 1. We're on page 431, and it says, I observe. Step 1, okay? You are interested in a phenomenon or are required to solve a problem. You make observations using your 5 senses. You can also use instruments such as the microscope or the telescope to extend your senses. Observations may or may not involve measurements. Observations that involve measurements are called quantitative observations. Observations that do not involve measurements are called qualitative observations. For example, I saw the snow melt is a qualitative observation. However, I saw that the snow had melted completely after 1 hour is a quantitative observation. So we're going down here into the blue box, just rereading those definitions. Quantitative observation, an observation involving quantities that can be expressed in numbers. Qualitative observation, an observation that involves quality, shape, or properties and cannot be expressed in numbers. Step number 2, I develop a research question or questions. Your observations will often give rise to questions. Sometimes you might want to deduce an explanation before carrying out your experimental investigation. You might also predict the answer to your question. This prediction is hypothetical, uncertain, and temporary. It must be confirmed or disproved by your experimental investigation. So we're in this little orange box over here. Example of a question. Does dark clothing become hotter in the sun than light clothing? An example of a hypothetical prediction. I think that dark clothing will become hotter than light clothing. We are now moving on to step number 3. I define the variables. You conduct an experiment to answer a question. In order for your results to be valid, it is important to specify the factors that you will be controlling. Examples of variables. Examples of variables. I must use 2 articles of clothing of different colors, 1 light and 1 dark. The variable is the color of the clothing. I must expose these 2 articles of clothing to the same light source for the same amount of time. The variable is the length of exposure to the light source. All right, and step number 4, we're looking at over here, I experiment. You must determine the steps of your experiment. This work is called the experimental procedure. Your procedure must be clear enough for another person to reproduce, right, so do it again, the same experiment. See figure 2. So we'll see that on the next page. Experimental procedure is a description of the steps and conditions of an experiment. Moving down here, you must, 1, choose the equipment and materials that you will need. 2, prepare a procedure that clearly numbers each step. This procedure must take laboratory safety instructions into account. Step 3, use all the equipment in your list. Step 4, respect and monitor all the variables that you have selected. Step 5, conduct your experiment and allow all the applicable, and follow all the applicable safety rules. Step 6, record all the information you collected. All right, so we're going to go on to the next page. All right, so we are now at the top of page 432, where they are kind of giving you an example of the procedure, of the experimental procedure, I should say. So they have the equipment and material. So equipment and material, a piece of white cardboard, a piece of black cardboard, 2 thermometers, 2 table lamps with 100-watt bulbs. Okay, so you can't see it, but it's at the top above this picture. The procedure: 1, place a piece of white cardboard under a lamp 30 centimeters away from the light bulb. Step 2, place a piece of black cardboard under another lamp 30 centimeters away from the light bulb. Step 3, record the initial temperature of the 2 thermometers. Step 4, slide a thermometer under each piece of cardboard. Step 5, turn on the lamps. Step 6, wait 20 minutes. Step 7, record the final temperatures of the 2 thermometers. And step 8, put away the equipment. Okay. So figure 2 over here says an example of an experimental procedure. list of material, and experimental setup. Okay, so that was what we just went through. And now we're going on to read over here, which says, I analyze my results and present them. Okay, so we're moving on from actually, we've done the experiment. Now, what do we do? Okay, so this is the final step. I analyze my results and present them. You must organize, analyze, and present your results in an appropriate manner. See topic 5. These results consist of all your observations. The values that you have calculated based on your observations are also a part of your results. You must analyze your results to answer the initial question or question. So that was in the beginning when you developed your research question or questions, okay? You must also be able to draw all possible conclusions from your experiment. So what have you been able to figure out based on your experiment, okay? So if you made a prediction, determine whether it is consistent with your results. It is important to analyze the results objectively, even when you are disappointed with them and they are not what you expected. So I'm just going to pause from the reading and talk about this here. It is important for you to analyze your results objectively. So this means that you have to put aside what it is you thought was going to happen and just analyze your results for what actually happened. Although you might feel like, oh, well, I wanted my prediction to be correct. You have to be objective and put aside all of your feelings and just analyze the data. Okay, so let's go back to the reading. You can discuss the results and conclusions with your classmates. You can also present the entire procedure in an oral or written lab report. So you guys will have to do written lab reports, and you guys will have to get ready for your science fair projects next year, okay guys? So yes, I've taken a pause from the reading again. Go back to the reading. Make any changes that you think are necessary to improve your procedure for next time. You can also make changes if you ask yourself other questions after the experiment. So over here, we see an example of the results from the experiment. Your results need to be very organized, very well labeled, because if anybody were to read your research, they should have a very good idea of what happened, what your results are, and they should be able to interpret them because of your data, right? So the stuff, the information that you collected, so that is so clear that they're able to understand what happened. Okay, so over here, an example of how to present results, temperature change, and under the pieces of cardboard. So you'll find that a lot of scientific research and experimental projects, the data is organized in tables. Tables are a very great way to present data in a neat way. Okay, so that is the reading from pages 430 to 432. So basically, let's look at the summary of the experimental method, right? So the scientific method is what we were talking about. That's how we basically study science, right? You observe something in the environment or there's a problem and you'd like to solve it. And how do you solve it? Well, you apply the experimental method. Okay, so here's a summary of what we saw in the reading. The experimental method consists of 5 steps. Step 1, you observe something or some things. Step 2, you develop a research question, or it can be questions based on observations. Step 3, design an experiment that will help you answer the questions. Step 4, you conduct the experiment. So you actually do the experiment. Step 5, your results. You get your results, you analyze them, and you present them in a report or orally. So again, I'd like to thank you for taking the time to listen to my annoying voice. If you have any questions about this scientific method, experimental method, or anything else that we've covered in class, please do not hesitate to email me at hinksons@loyola.ca. Have a great day.